I am Damon Hom. I'm superintendent in charge of water system operations here at East Bay Municipal Utility District, or often referred to as East Bay MUD. And as was discussed just a second ago, the topic of fire is always on the minds of everyone in our region. But the wildfires in Southern California served as a recent reminder that we need to always stay prepared. So today I'm going to provide a basic overview of East Bay MUD's water distribution system, let you know how it works. And that's the portion of our water system. The water distribution system is the area from our water treatment plant that serves our customers. And that kind of sets the stage for describing how East Bay MUD is prepared for fires and how East Bay MUD supports fire departments when a fire actually happens. Oops. All right, so just a little bit about East Bay MUD and how our system works. First, about our service area. It covers 332 square miles. It supplies water to 1.4 million customers in 20 cities and 15 unincorporated communities in parts of Alameda and Contra Costa counties. Along the East Bay shore, it stretches from Crockett in the north down to San Lorenzo and Castro Valley in the south. That includes the cities of Richmond, Berkeley, Oakland, Alameda. And to the east, it includes the La Miranda area, Walnut Creek, and the San Ramon Valley. Whoops, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. So first I wanted to explain how the varying topography in the East Bay dictates how the East Bay MUD water system is built. Our system is made of stacked elevation layers called pressure zones. And these zones are interconnected, but individually, they're their own mini water systems. So from the water treatment plant, water is delivered by gravity. Let's go back. Water is delivered by gravity from the water treatment plant through pipes to a reservoir in a base pressure zone. And to move water up the hill, pumps are turned on, and that feeds the reservoir in the next higher zone. And in this slide, reservoir 2 serves customers in the area in green down below by gravity. And then, again, to continue moving water up the hill, another set of pumps feeds the next higher zone, and reservoir 3 on here serves the area in yellow down below by gravity. So you can see these different layers, these different zones that we have, and we can move water up the hill, and we can also move water downhill from one zone that's higher down to another zone that's lower through a control valve. So that's basically how our system's set up in these different elevation layers. And this slide gives a sense of the topography in the East Bay MUD service area. The lower elevation areas in orange, mostly near the sea level, close to the East Bay shoreline, are fed by gravity from the water treatment plants. And as elevation rises, pumps are turned on and are required to move water up the hill in cascades of rising pressure zones, and those are shown in purple. So lower elevations in orange, higher elevations in purple. And basically how our system is set up, once water leaves the water treatment plant, it goes into these base zones. And these base zones are at lower elevations, and they serve large areas with large water demands. And they have large reservoirs, large valves, large pipes, and have the ability to move pretty large flows in those areas. And as you get higher and higher up in elevation, the water system infrastructure is smaller. And that's due to lower customer demand. When the demand is lower, then the infrastructure needed is smaller. And the flow capacity, the ability to move water, is generally smaller in these smaller zones compared to the larger base zone. So as you get higher up in elevation, we have a little bit smaller flow capacity in those areas. Here's a lot of information about our water distribution system and our infrastructure. There's a lot of information here, but I want to just convey some basic information. There's some colors here in the background, and these show the different pressure zones that are in East Bay Mud service area. We have 120 pressure zones. Most of these zones are in the hills where topography changes, and the tanks shown in the blue icon and the pumping plants with the black triangles are located in the hills. And that makes sense because more infrastructure is needed to move water up the hill in elevation. So all that infrastructure is needed to supply and serve all these zones that are higher up in the hills. So that's just a little bit of background on our East Bay Mud service area. So now I wanted to go into how East Bay Mud has prepared for fires. And for us here at East Bay Mud, many things changed after the 1991 East Bay Hills or Oakland Hills fire. Really affected our community. We made operational changes after those fires to our tank operation, especially during red flag warnings. We made ourselves more prepared with our fire equipment. We replaced hydrants to have more standardized outlet connections. We installed standby generators at key facilities and purchased portable emergency equipment and dispersed them throughout our service area for ease of access. We upgraded much of our water system infrastructure, especially in the fire zones, to help support fire flow needs in the hills. And we also emphasized coordination between East Bay Mud, local cities and counties, and fire agencies. And those coordination efforts continue today. So East Bay Mud, for fire preparedness, performs vegetation management in its watershed lands across fire roads and at our facility sites. And that vegetation management can be through grazing, mowing, treatments, and prescribed fires in conjunction with other agencies. We annually manage over 10,000 acres in our watershed lands and over 700 acres in and around our water system facilities. And we partner with other agencies to do certain projects like fuel breaks and prescribed fires. The image to the right shows some grazing activity by cows. You can see our one of our East Bay Mud reservoirs in the upper right, and then the grazing that's occurring in this area. A good example of one of the projects that we worked on is here on Fish Ranch Road. It's a fuel break project. It's up above the Caldecott Tunnel between the Oakland Berkeley Hills and Orinda. And you can see the before and after photos of this fuel break. You can see that the similar image, we've got the signs here, the speed limit sign there and right there, but you can see a huge amount of fuel was removed in this after photo. And this was a partnership between East Bay Regional Parks, Berkeley Fire Department, and UC Berkeley. All right, so one of the things that we do, just getting back to our water system pressure zone schematic, is we made operational changes after the 1991 Hills fire. And we kind of managed our tank operations a little bit different. So when the National Weather Service issues a red flag warning in the East Bay Mud will identify the impacted fire weather zones and keep reservoirs supplying those zones full for the duration of the warning period. So reservoirs serving the red flag area, so in this case, it's reservoir 3 here. It's serving this red flag area. And we will keep that reservoir topped off and full. We'll keep pumps running to make sure that that's full. So we've got the most amount of storage available to fight a fire if it occurs in this red flag area. Other tanks in other zones that are not affected will maintain a normal operating range during that period. One of the things we also do during a red flag warning is we will limit our maintenance activities like mowing that might potentially spark a fire in those drier conditions. And in preparation for PG&E's public safety power shutoffs, when PG&E will take down power when fire conditions merit that, East Bay Mud prepares by doing the same thing as we would do in a red flag operation. We top off our reservoir storage. And we also, in the months prior to some of the peak fire season, we also pre-deploy portable generators and portable pumps to our highest risk pumping plants that are expected to be out of power during those times. Early in the season, PG&E provides us with a list of pumping plants that are most likely to be out of power. So we take that list, analyze it, make sure for areas that are most susceptible to power loss and have not as much storage in those areas, we deploy generators out there to make sure we can replenish those tanks and make sure there's water in those areas. And note that not all of our pumping plants get portable generators. We only put portable generators out at locations where storage will only last for less than a couple of days. If storage will last for many days on end, 3, 4, 5 days, then we'll not have a portable generator there. We do have some backup generators as needed to deploy in an emergency if those other locations are impacted. One of the things that we do at East Bay Mud is we have seasonal reservoirs where we take reservoirs out of service during winter season and bring those back in for the fire season in the summertime. In East Bay Mud, we got to balance the need to maintain water quality and the need for emergency storage. So when water demand goes low, water age in the system tends to increase and water quality will start to degrade. And in those months, we take those reservoirs out of service. But in the summer months, when demands increase and fire risk also increases, we return those reservoirs to service to support the fire flow needs. Our infrastructure, so we rehabilitate and replace our infrastructure through capital investments and make sure their size to support fire protection. Our reservoirs, the top 30% of our reservoir capacity is used for normal customer water demands, while the remaining 70% is used for emergencies, including fires. We've got pumps, valves, and pipes that we design, and they all meet our design fire flows for our system. And if power goes out, we have stationary generators that power all of our water treatment plants and our key pumping facilities. And like I said before, we have our own fleet of portable generators and pumps that we can store and deploy across our system. And a big thing that East Bay Mud focuses on is maintenance of our infrastructure. We make sure that it's in proper working order and it continues to meet customer water demands, as well as fire flows. And our maintenance program increases the reliability of our system. So we want to make sure we're maintaining our equipment to deliver the water supplies to hydrants when the fire agencies actually need it during a fire. And probably the biggest thing that we do for fire preparedness at East Bay Mud, and this kind of came out of the 1991 Hills Fire also, is a bigger emphasis on coordination between East Bay Mud, local cities and counties, and fire agencies. East Bay Mud hosts an annual fire agency forum to collaborate on operational issues and information sharing with fire departments across our service area. And East Bay Mud is also a member of the Hills Emergency Forum with cities and major landowners in the Hills to develop strategies for wildfire management. And East Bay Mud also serves an advisory role with the East Bay Wildfire Coalition that includes elected officials from East Bay cities and counties. So that's all the East Bay Mud fire preparedness. So now I'm going to move on to what EBMUD does during an actual fire. We encourage our local fire agencies to call EBMUD's dispatch control center if they request any kind of assistance during a fire. For large fires, we actually will have a dedicated staff person report to the scene of a fire and act as an on-site liaison for fire departments. So they could be the liaison for our own staff, and if they need to operate a certain valve or piece of equipment in the system, that person could be there for them. We have control room operators that monitor the water system and can support firefighting efforts by operating pumps to boost water pressures. We can deploy portable generators or pumps if necessary. So those are all things that we can do to help directly support the fire agencies with our water system. Also, we have 5 large local raw water lakes with a combined capacity of almost 500 billion gallons that can be used to support helicopter drops for fighting fires. So if you see the image on the bottom right, it shows a helicopter that actually in October of 2024 for the Keller fire in Oakland, this helicopter pulled water from Upper San Leandro Reservoir between Moraga and Castro Valley, pulled that water from that reservoir and dropped it several times over the Keller fire. So hydrants, just wanted to kind of talk about a little bit about the hydrant operation. Hydrants are where the utility, the water utility, and the fire department, where our worlds meet at this location. And since the fires in Southern California in January, we get a lot of questions from the public about hydrants. They question whether the hydrant near their home will work when there's a fire. And what we relay to those customers is that hydrants are simple, sturdy, reliable devices, and they have a good track record of being operational. But here I just wanted to kind of walk through the simplistic operation of a hydrant. So on the left shows a hydrant, on the right shows kind of a cut sheet of a hydrant. And when the hydrant is in EBMUD's water system, they're all charged. There's already water in the body of a hydrant, and that water is always pressurized. And after you remove the outlet cap of the hydrant, you turn the operating nut that unseats the valve. So the valve and the valve stem, you can see that to the right. And as the valve stem moves and water flows out, it's as simple and straightforward as turning your faucet on and off. So this is the kind of concept we convey to customers, letting them know that these are pretty reliable devices, and not a lot can happen to make these not work actually. So EBMUD owns and maintains these hydrants in our water system, and will repair and replace them when needed. When fire hydrants are installed, they're designed for single structure fires, meaning a single home in a residential community. And depending on the zone, especially a smaller zone higher up in the hills, like I was talking about before, in those areas where infrastructure is smaller, opening up multiple hydrants significantly increases the water demand on the system. And that demand will likely reduce the local system pressures in that area. Our water system, especially in our higher elevation zones, can fight single structure fires pretty well, but it's limited in its capacity to fight the impacts of a large wildfire. Generally, EBMUD has a pretty resilient water system with a fair amount of redundancy, but a high wind-driven wildfire and the water demand necessary to fight it would stress any water distribution system in most areas in the country, including ours. We understand that our water system is just one important piece of the puzzle in fighting wildland-urban interface fires. And we know we need to continually communicate and coordinate with fire departments and cities and counties to increase our chances of success against fires. And that's what we're doing now. We're reaching out to fire departments, we're reaching out to cities and counties, trying to work together to come up with a coordinated solution for this wildfire issue. And that is all I've got. Any questions?
Thanks, Stephen. That was great. Any questions from the group?
Yes.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Damon. Very informative, and I'm sympathetic and respect your role as you've inherited all that infrastructure and you've got to operate it as best you can. But what if the infrastructure in itself is inadequate for wildfires, which I believe it is? There's a fire code that does specify fire flow and pressure requirements in residential and commercial areas and at different elevations. And those requirements are, as you've already indicated, are for maybe single or double structure firefighting purposes, not for a massive wildfire with hundreds or thousands of demands placed in almost instantaneously on a system. So the starting point in history has been compliance with the fire code requirements. And that's what you've inherited. And that's what we as a community have inherited. We have 6-inch or maybe 8-inch water mains in our streets that are designed for a fire and a resident in our neighborhood, not for a wildfire. So it's and I'm sympathetic to your role as being an operations supervisor, but it really is a compliance with engineering standards that built these systems. And they're just not adequate for a massive wildfire that we've experienced. So the real question is, what do we do about that? And appreciate the fact you may not be able to answer it, but and my first conclusion is we need to make our communities aware that that is the situation. That, you know, the distribution system and the reservoirs, pump stations and everything have been developed over the last 100 years and not for and we just got to be realistic in our communication. That we want to believe that our utilities and fire departments have all the tools at hand to be able to fight these things. But what if they don't have the tools? What if they don't have the infrastructure? And that is the case. So what do we do about it? And in a very pessimistic view, I have concluded that the only thing that we can really do is inform our communities that if they get a warning about a wildfire, is just avoid the temptation to sit on the front lawn with your garden hose and fight any sparks that come in, and just get out of there. It's a life-saving move. And that is the education and communication that is needed is for those areas, one of which I live in, that we just need to be prepared, mentally, emotionally prepared, that when the time comes, when we get a warning, just get out of Dodge. And and then the big question is, what about improving the infrastructure and just the increasing the fire code requirements for the purpose of fight. And I don't know whether there's the political will at all levels to take on that, because it's a massive investment to improve the infrastructure. And it's not just adding one more reservoir, it's multiple reservoirs. It's major pipelines to and from the reservoirs, based upon the fire flow demands that are going to be placed upon the system. So your last statement that it's challenging system is, of course, it's very challenging. It's very challenging for you and your team to try to operate these facilities under very stressful conditions, and it all stems from the fire code requirements. So, then one last thought.
I want to hear Damon's answer too, Bob.
All right. So I signed up for a notification process, and I just want everyone here to write this down. It's a website that you can put on your birthday phone, Gary, called Watch Duty. Watch Duty is a nonprofit, volunteer operated free app that whenever they hear of a brush fire or any type of a major fire, they notify everybody that's on the website. And so Sunday, I got a notification beep that I opened it up and was talking about a fire in Brentwood. Now, so I looked at it and said, okay, well, that's in Brentwood. It's not going to be much of a threat here yet. But so that's the recommendation, is everyone should have Watch Duty on their phones and pay attention to it. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Bob. No, I think you bring up really important points. Damon, what are your thoughts?
No, I think your assessment of our system and our current situation is spot on. You're right. Our system, we basically inherited a big chunk of our system, and in the decades where we've built our own infrastructure at EBMUD, it's been to the fire code as you described, and the fire code basically is set up for a single or maybe a larger commercial fire that we can fight with a couple hydrants in our water system. But yeah, a large wind-driven wildfire, I don't think anyone really expects our water system, at least here at EBMUD, expects our water system to put that out. We could probably do a better job of informing the public of what the realities are. And we have already put that out in some of our documentation that we put on our website. And one of the things that we've been doing, like I said, is the outreach. We've been trying to, talk with the cities and counties, talk with the fire departments, just to get the conversation going. Because if we're going to, help protect the public, we've got to do a better job of maybe diversifying how we, approach it. We can't just say, hey, EBMUD's got the water utility, the water system, EBMUD and the fire department, you guys go put it out, and expect everyone to just walk away and think everything's going to be good. It's probably got to be maybe a combination of things. Maybe there is some water system improvements that we can do, but there also maybe needs to be a more diversified solution. Maybe it's having residents have defensible space. Maybe it's home hardening. Maybe it is maybe having some mobile solutions. Is it the helicopters that drop water from our lakes onto the fire? Is it maybe some other thing that we haven't thought about yet? Maybe the fire code needs to change. And if the fire code needs to change, that doesn't happen overnight. And if the fire code does change, then once the code changes, then that means that maybe some infrastructure changes might happen after that. But that is unfortunately going to be years down the line. And for now, me being a person who has to operate the system and be prepared for these fires as much as possible. We're just trying to make do with what we've got. And in a lot of cases, that might not be enough for fighting a wind-driven wildfire, but we will try to do our best to put us in the right position to, allocate as much water as we can to those certain areas. But yeah, no, I think great summary of kind of what is really going on in our system and many other water systems here in the Bay Area and in across California.
Damon.
Yeah, thank you for that response. I guess I just think that our communities need to be aware of the reality and just be prepared to act quickly. And so I guess that's my bottom line.
Yeah, excellent point. Catherine, did you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Damon said. So, like Damon said, I think our system is not built for what we're going to be seeing in the future, right? Like these fires are unprecedented. It's nothing that we or any of our predecessors would have ever guessed was something that we were going to have to be prepared for. So, we have been coordinating very closely with all of the fire districts in terms of developing strategies, improving our communications and determining sort of what, discussing what infrastructure we have and what limitations we have. Additionally, to tack onto what Bob was saying, so we've done quite a bit of outreach, especially after these LA fires. We've held webinars, we've developed fact sheets, we've been present at, I think there was like a Orinda Wildfire Preparedness event last weekend. So we're definitely trying to get out there to the community, letting people know, what our limitations are, what really, an urban water system is built for at this point. And then what they can do to help protect themselves in terms of home hardening, and also what we're doing in terms of fuel mitigation, because that's going to be really important too.
Catherine. I see a couple other comments and questions in the chat, so maybe I'll read those. So James Lara says, hi Damon, during the summer months, do you return all of East Bay MUD's treated water reservoirs to service, or only certain reservoirs based on wildfire risks and water quality considerations?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Thanks, James. For East Bay MUD's reservoirs, we have we have 170 reservoirs in our system. And during the wintertime at its peak, we might have up to 50 reservoirs out of service in the treated water system. We'll return about a dozen of those back to service to kind of manage higher demands and fire flow issues. But we talk about inheriting systems. So East Bay MUD inherited, even before East Bay MUD was created, we inherited a bunch of much smaller water companies. And those had, way different criteria for putting together, sizing their reservoirs. And some of them were just lakes that turned into reservoirs, essentially. And basically back then, bigger was better. So now that we have water quality regulations, we just can't have water storage everywhere because water quality is going to go bad. So it's that same balance between having emergency storage and being able to manage water quality. So we do have still in the summertime, still about 40 reservoirs that remain out of service. Probably the bulk of the volume is tied up in maybe like 4 or 5 bigger reservoirs, but we do have a good amount of tanks that we have that remain out of service. Hope that answers your question, James. It's kind of, we do bring some reservoirs back into service for the summer, but many we don't, is the bottom line.
We have another question in the chat from Rich T, and it's a long one, so I'm wondering if Rich is willing to step up and ask that.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind. I think this is a good topic for discussion and just brings awareness. And I was just recently in a presentation, and these were from the water agencies that were involved in the Palisades and Eaton fires, and they really brought the perspective of what's happening in the during the middle and the lessons learned. We can be as prepared as we can, but there's always surprises. And I kind of shared in the chat a little bit of the surprises that they discovered is that during their time, there was a lot of their own personnel that suffered the losses, and they were distracted with their losses, so they were depending on those folks to go operate the plant, but they weren't available. And so now they're working on plans as, okay, so if we're affected by lack of staff, how do we operate the system in a situation without any personnel? So they're kind of looking into that. I think we circle back more into communication. One of the takeaways that I had from the meeting was, I think it was right on. It says, out of the gate, people think it's a failure. They expect that the system should be running at all times. And I think it boils down to communication to them early on, and kind of explain the challenges and the way the entire system operates. An example was they couldn't operate the system because each home that was burned down became a leak in the system. And so they needed to go fix the leak first in order to, because they lost the pressure. So I think folks when you're in the middle of it, there's a lot of emotions going on, and just managing those emotions at that situation is challenging. So I think to get a little bit more empathy is probably just bombarding them with communication, especially around the summer, and just letting folks know what the system is capable of doing, and the reason why it could fail in the middle, and what the agency is doing. But then also giving them ideas on how could they help in wildfire management. But the other thing that came out of the discussion was understanding the do not drink orders. There was a little bit of miscommunication during that time. It's a very high emotional moment, but just understanding that and maybe sharing that with the community early on. When does a do not drink order go in place? So just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Rich. Those are good insights. And I've heard similar things from agencies following other emergencies, just how to manage the fact that your staff live in the community and need to tend to their own family emergency. Catherine, did you want to respond?
Yeah. So regarding that, we've been planning for earthquakes for a long time. And so fires is something that is a little more recent that we're, more concerned about. But we do business continuity planning regularly. We have business continuity plans within each one of our divisions and departments that identify if there were an earthquake, if there were a fire, if there were something else, how would we work? Who would work? We have people sort of located throughout. We have a very large service area, and then also upcountry as well. So we've got, staff spread out, and we've identified, who would potentially be available, and sort of what that plan is. So certainly something that we do have a lot of people in the Oakland area, but we also have people in other areas too.
Dave?
Thanks, Jackie. Mike Romer is not able to join us today, but Mike is the one of the directors of the Moraga-Orinda Fire District. And one of the things that Mike has helped spearhead in Orinda, specifically, Catherine mentioned the recent community meeting. We've now gotten mailers going out identifying that on red flag days, which, speaking about infrastructure, certain roads are going to be set aside as no parking, so that those roads can be effective to get people out during a wildfire if one were to occur. So it's there's obligations for us as a community on water infrastructure and the fire stations and that part of it, but also just roads and parking and those elements of infrastructure are really important too. So certainly seeing that in our area, the fire district has stepped up and really getting the community mobilized, informed and mobilized. Then Eric Newman had a couple of really good questions about water quality. First, Eric was just asking, what discussions about upgrading distribution, and we've talked, Damon, you've already addressed that to some degree, but also, this balancing of water quality versus emergency preparedness especially during the summer and red flag warnings. Can you talk a little bit about the push and pull and maybe how water quality could be addressed in this context in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we battle with is if you have more storage in the system, that means that you're going to have water, maybe a little bit more water available to fight wildfires, but that also means that water is aging in your system. So the longer that water sits in your system, that period that it sits, it's going to start slowly degrading on your disinfectant residual. And if we try to, so that can become a public health issue if the chlorine residual goes down and there isn't that protection for the public to fight off any kind of, harmful bacteriological things in the water. But also if, let's say we try to keep that more storage in our system to maintain more fire flow storage, is there anything that we can do to kind of manage that? And we could, we can do what we sometimes do we kind of spot treat a lot of these reservoirs. We might just add chlorine to that, but there's water quality impact to that too. Even though we add chlorine, often what that does is it creates disinfectant byproducts. And a few years ago, we had big issue when we had a lot of storms. We had a lot of organic material in our waters that was coming into our system, and that basically created a lot of precursors for these disinfectant byproducts. So that could become a more of a long-term water quality issue. These disinfectant byproducts, if we have longer water age, need to treat those reservoirs and create these disinfection byproducts, then that could affect customers living in those particular areas. And that can become, it might not be a fire issue at that point anymore, then it becomes a public health issue. So which one do we kind of battle, right? There are some other technologies where we might be able to combine the chlorine and some ammonia that's in the water to minimize the disinfection byproducts, but still that costs money, there's a lot of effort into that. So just balancing more water versus water quality is something that we have talked about a lot here at East Bay Mud, and there's not a great solution, just because you might achieve in one area, maybe water quality, but you might fail in another area, maybe fire storage quantity. Hopefully that answers some of the question.
Damon,
that's kind of the background that I'm seeing.
Damon, this is Eric. That's really helpful. I guess I was thinking, could it be something as simple as the actual regulation, right? And being able to accommodate your kind of emergency water, so to speak, differently than your drinkable water or your potable water that's getting distributed to the households. I mean, is it if there was a change in the regulation that allowed you to kind of account for it differently, would that change the way that you view it?
Possibly, but I mean, like a lot of the water quality regulations are built on public health and maintaining that, and that's not something that East Bay Mud would want to sacrifice. But we are exploring some other options out there that where we might be able to, like I said, it's not something that East Bay Mud has committed to, but we do have some reservoirs that have been out of service for quite a long time. If we put water in there and just potentially valved it out of the system, that wouldn't be an impact to our customer water quality. And then when a fire happens, we have that storage available. Unfortunately, that's going to be water that is not suitable for people to drink. So then it becomes this balance of, hey, during a fire, don't drink the water. Do we want that to be an automatic thing? I don't know. That's something that we would have to kind of weigh the pros and cons of that here at East Bay Mud.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question, right? Because wildfires are obviously also a public health issue, right? Not just in terms of, the potential casualties, but also the air quality, and those sorts of things, right? So it's all public health, right? It's just the lens that you're looking at it through. Thank you very much, Damon. That was helpful.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Great question. I see Director Luce has a question about whether anything's changed with the National Weather Service and their ability to issue red flag warnings. Have you noticed any changes in your coordination with them?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, we always have staff that's looking at the National Weather Service website and just keeping an eye on those. But I mean, it seems like the frequency hasn't changed that much, and their ability to issue those red flag warnings hasn't seemed like it's changed that much either in the past compared to maybe 5-10 years ago.
Good to hear. Hopefully that continues.
Yeah.
Other questions for the group?
I have a quick question. Thank you so much for being here in this great presentation. I'm curious from the perspective of a public policy advocacy group like EBLC, what's the most helpful thing that we could do in supporting this work that you're doing?
I don't know yet. we're kind of thinking about it. I mean, I think a big part of it is kind of engaging the fire departments, engaging cities and counties. We talked about what East Bay Mud is able to do. We are able to, fight fires, fight single structure fires. Maybe if it's a commercial facility, we can do that. If it's a couple hydrants that need to be operated to do that, we can do that pretty confidently. Maybe the question is, hey, does the fire code need to change? And do we want to, push cities and counties or the state to maybe start thinking in that direction? There's probably people already thinking about that, but we can't design our system for criteria that doesn't exist, right? So we have to have some criteria. Right now, in many residential areas, the criteria for fire flow is 1,500 gallons per minute from a hydrant for 2 hours. And what we do to design for that is we make sure all of our pipes and valves can deliver that flow. We make sure we have that at least that amount of storage in our storage tanks. Oftentimes we have more, but if we are required to have more than that, that needs to be more of a policy change. And I don't know how that gets initiated, but we're starting to just put feelers out there to cities and counties and fire departments that, we can't just, hey, we've actually had some conversations with some of the fire chiefs in Contra Costa and Alameda County. They say, hey, East Bay Mud, we want you to have more water storage. And then we say, well, how much? And they just say more. And we can't work off of that. We need some better criteria to work off of.
That makes sense. Thanks.
So Damon, this is Bob again. Thank you very much. And all this story does reminds me of how thankful I am to be a retired professional, and I don't have to be in a position like you're in of having to make things work. So thank you very much for what you do.
Appreciate it, Bob. Thanks.
Dave?
Yeah, Damon, I agree, although I'm not sitting in Bob's chair yet. I would ask you, the Piedmont Fire Chief did a great job when you did your internal presentation to the EBMUD team, and Jackie and I both got a chance to see that. Are there successes that you've had with some of the fire departments in terms of I mean, you talked about the coordination and outreach that you're already doing. Any advances that you would recommend that we look for in specifically in our Contra Costa area?
I mean, I think the one thing is I think there's still a long road to go, I think, and continuing that communication. I don't think we're going to make any major changes overnight. It's going to be years and years of progressive changes that might help us kind of battle these wildfires. But I just, maybe this is a broken record, but I think it really has to do with communicating, coordinating with our public partners and trying to collectively come up with a solution. Because it might not be just a water system solution. It might be something else. So we don't want to be the only game in town when it comes to fighting wildfires. I think it needs to be a more diversified solution that we'd be proud to be a part of that solution, but we don't want to be the only game in town. And then just working with our partners in the public to make sure that happens is important.
Director Gomez?
And thank you, Damon. Great presentation. I really enjoyed it so far. I just wanted to go a little deeper into my question about the National Weather Service, because there recently have been reports of 40% of their offices being short-staffed, and overnight staffing has been cut in many places, which led to some deaths in the South recently. So I'm wondering if there's a redundancy that we don't exclusively rely on the National Weather Service for red flag warnings, but are there any local, regional, or statewide forecasting folks that we could tap or rely on for these things in case our National Weather Service is no longer as reliable as it used to be?
Yeah, I don't know, but I haven't, like I said, we haven't heard of anything that has been an issue with the forecast that the National Weather Service has been putting out there. The one agency that I know, or the one company that I know that is doing a very similar effort is PG&E. They're looking at their public safety power shutoffs. I mean, it's one of the things where they're looking at the same kind of information as the National Weather Service, and potentially even have even more scrutiny over their forecast, because it means a lot of dollars and cents and lives if their company is sparking the fire. But I do know that they've got a forecasting group that is looking at all that information similar to the National Weather Service. So there's a potential if for some reason if the National Weather Service cannot issue those forecasts or those warnings, that we do have some contacts with PG&E where we might be able to find out some more information. But truthfully, I think it'll be all over the news. Like these fire weather events are big news, so it's hard for me to imagine that it's going to get forgotten that we're going to be in these dangerous fire weather conditions. But yeah, it's something to keep an eye on, definitely.
Thank you.
Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Damon, for a great presentation and an overview of the East Bay Mud system, touching on, I think, Meg's question and Bob's philosophical aspect of this. You know, when our systems fail, we turn to insurance companies. And when the insurance companies can't pay up, we turn to the state. And so I'm wondering if the state actually, Meg, has a bigger role. And you know, it's billions of dollars when one of these events gets out of control. And from an East Bay Mud standpoint, they don't have billions of dollars to invest further into their system. And so is there, and we didn't have a speaker from either the insurance industry or the state today, but there is definitely a role there in determining how big of a system do we build, you know, in preparation for these fire events. And I don't have an answer for it. I just wanted to, you know, just put it out there. And I think, Meg, from a public policy standpoint, where we end up when the insurance companies aren't making enough money and we need deep pockets, we turn to the state. So the state really ought to have a role, I think, in setting a standard and determining, you know, what are we ready for?
Yeah, absolutely, Gary. I don't know, Damon, if you have any further thoughts on that, but from a state perspective, we are very happy to, you know, advocate for anything that our local partners think would be helpful in that process.
Oh, thanks. I'll make sure to relay that over to the folks over here. And if it makes sense for us to make a push or request some support, we'll come your way.
Great, thank you.
So Meg, on the policy thing, I mean, the impacted communities are a portion of Contra Costa County and Alameda County. So it's not county-wide, it's not East Bay wide, but the impact is so dramatic that those communities, and Dave mentioned Orinda, and there's others here on my street that probably are on those warning maps. And those are the impacted losses. So what can EBLC do to help the communication of what the reality is? And I don't know what that is, but it's leading up to policy. Really, it's the policy is the ones that affect these communities that don't have are the greatest at risk. Let me put it that way. They're the greatest risk for wildfires. So anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I think from an EBLC perspective, protecting vulnerable communities, even if it's not technically the entire county, is still a very huge priority because that has ripple effects. They're part of the community. That's a huge part of it. And in terms of communication, yes, I think that is a big role the EBLC can play. And that's something I'll just say out there, like we take positions on public policy, but we also serve as a very strong communicator about these issues. And so if there are specific pieces of information about wildfire preparedness or knowledge or any of those things that would be helpful for these communities and for other partners working on this issue, like we are happy to help be a part of that communication strategy from our newsletters. We have meetings with local elected officials, meetings like this, where we're able to share this information with our partners. I think that's a big part of the work that we do. So you're absolutely right, Bob. Like we want to be a part of that communication strategy.
thank you.
Thanks, Charisse from Assemblymember Barracon's office has a great comment in the chat about leaning on experts to support state policy. Thanks for that. Any other questions or points of discussion?
Jackie, I'll just jump back in and say that since our friends from Braga or Rindo were not able to be with us today. Damon, I will specifically ask them how much storage, not more, how much, and I will report back to the group at our next meeting with some updates from at least that fire district, which serves my part of the community, and we'll see if we can advance that conversation around what the fire departments can do relative to building code and expectations.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Well, thanks again, Damon. This has been a really great discussion. We really appreciate all the work and thoughtful preparation that East Bay Med is doing, even in the face of the challenges we've been talking about.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, and Catherine, thank you for joining as well, and really jumping in and helping with just filling out the East Bay Mud role and just how active a role you all are taking and looking out for this important issue for our communities.
Thanks for having me. And I see so many familiar faces. I realize I've been absent in this group for a while, and I need to come back. So it's great to see everybody.
Yeah, glad to see you.
Meg or Gary, any closing words?
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody, and it's been a great session. And we've got a little less than 20 minutes left. Dave Richardson, I think you owe us, you could just talk about something. We'll let you slide. Anyhow, looking forward to seeing everybody in person. I was down there at Brown and Caldwell earlier this morning, not realizing this was a Zoom meeting, but our next two meetings are in person. Bob Whitley's going to carry the load in terms of groundwater, and then Ann has a great presentation lined up for sea level rise in the Bay. So thank you all. Have a good day, and we'll see you next month.